let's invite our next speaker from Fortum, Vice President IT Operations, who recently actually took on the interim role of SVP IT, Bruno Almeida. Welcome on stage.
Hello, everyone. Very good morning on my behalf as well. Really happy to be here. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. I think, as you know, AI has been all around us. The hype is real, the hype is here. We see it across boardrooms, we see it across our table meetings with our teams, we see it in our everyday life, in the news. It is all around us. Now, just one quick point, because I think that there's a little bit of an issue with our slides, but no worries. I think we can handle it. All right. But as mentioned, like the hype is here, and we see it in our daily lives a lot more than maybe sometimes we wish to see them. Now, as technology leaders, we know that every few years, we are faced with a wave of a disruption, a technology that is so disruptive that generates a lot of these hypes. We've seen it before. We've seen it with virtualization, with mobile phones, with containers. We see it with blockchain, with cloud. And in the near future, we'll see it a lot more with quantum, as an example. Now, all of these moments are a leadership test. Are the moments where we are faced with questions from the investors, from shareholders, from our team members, from our peers, from our family. It is a moment to reflect on what can we do differently. And the reality is that when you look at the world around us, regardless if you think is overhyped or not, the reality it is that it is already a reality and it is part of our daily life. We see it in big investments that were made in different companies on AI. We see it in our daily lives. For instance, when if we order a package and UPS is delivering it, we know that with the pace of today's world, it's unbearable to think that only humans can deliver that optimization of the routes at that speed. So naturally, as UPS has been also sharing, they have quite a lot of, let's say, breaking points created with AI. Same with Netflix. If you are watching Netflix, you know that a human will be, or scaling that infrastructure with humans will be pretty much impossible. And the same when you order a coffee from Starbucks. All of this is around it. And one of the challenges is that, of course, they are great success stories for those companies, but also it raised the expectations for everyone around us. Today, even if you are not a technologist, you already expect a certain quality of service or a certain excellence or a certain automation that is by just living through our life when you use your phone, when you use your TV. Now, the point is that how we as technology leaders can face that, and how do we face those questions that we get inevitably within our own organizations. Now, at Fortum, we have three very clear strategic priorities as a company. One, deliver a reliable, clean energy. The second, drive the decarbonization across industries. And then the third, transform and develop. Naturally, for us to execute on that strategy, digital is a very big part of it. Now, when we think about our digital ambition, we think in three different pillars. We think about growth and how we can enable more growth with digital, how we can be more efficient using digital, and how we can continuously improve our security and sustainability. Now, of course, this translates very much in the day-to-day, but how could we, when we think about digital, it's not an IT thing. It is something that is all across the organization. Now, when we shared during last year our digital strategy and our digital strategy objectives, now These three pillars are, of course, very well represented. But naturally, when you think about fulfilling that strategy as a company and that ambition, it is not an IT target. They are very linked to business targets. Now, when you think about that, how can you make that progress visible? Well, you see it in how we can elevate the customer excellence, how we can strengthen the optimization, and how can we automate more of our operations, how we can enhance the employee experience, our asset management. So all of this becomes visible as part of that, linked to business KPIs and business targets. But naturally, for that to happen, it requires very strong digital foundations. You cannot automate, you cannot leverage AI fully if you don't have a good baseline and a good structure behind it. Now, today I want to talk a little bit about that and how can technology leaders face or balance those rising tensions across both the expectations that are created by different business stakeholders or business or even society versus the reality of operating and securing and having guardrails that prevent when AI might not be going so well. And we have also that case. For when I was researching for any, let's say for every single case of what was the most impactful and successful AI, I found 10 other ones where AI became a nightmare. We see that all around us as well. And that's a very challenging balance for us to do, meaning that in one way, in one hand, we want to leverage AI, that we see all of that success stories and we see how can we reinvent our processes, how can we rethink our process, how can we automate more. In the other hand, we see that sometimes a very missing guardrail or a missing configuration or something that was not done so well, or maybe too a rapid experimentation that went to production too early without the checks and balances, created a huge amount of damage. And this is one of the biggest challenges that we need to balance. In one way, how do we accelerate? In the other way, how do we ensure that we have enough guardrails to prevent a disaster? And a little bit as the saying goes with automobiles, cars have brakes so that they can go faster. And the same needs to happen with automation and AI. Now, where to start? I think that's one of the key questions that people often ask. Okay, where do you make sense of the chaos that we live in? I think one of our, at Fortum, one of our first aspects that we wanted to cover was operating model. It all starts with, even if you know where you want to go, what's your strategy, it starts so you need to pair it up with how you want to work as an organization. Now, you will see a question popping up in your screen about operating model. I'm also eager to hear how you are thinking about operating models. We thought that operating model is something that we needed to do first, and then technology comes second. Regardless of what technology vendors you adopt, you need to have a strong foundation on how you want to operate. Now, in our case, when we looked at the IT operating model, we look at these 4 different phases. It's how you steer that portfolio, how you steer the incoming day-to-day life of requests, of initiatives. How do you identify those opportunities? So how do you prioritize those opportunities? When you see that there is an experiment or a new chance to modernize, a new idea to do something differently, how do you actually prioritize them, that you are putting your effort in the ones that are the most relevant? Which, as technologies, we know that we have a lot of ideas, and oftentimes what the challenge comes, like, where do we start? What do we do first? Then, of course, having like how you want to develop, either continuous development, be it as a project with a beginning and an end, you need to also have checks and balances for that. And maybe one of the most underrated, but naturally coming from IT operations, one of the ones that I respect a lot is how we operate. So once you create something new, how do you operate that in the day-to-day for the years to come? It's very easy to do an experiment or start with something but is very hard on how does that affect continuously in the day-to-day your IT, your company. Now, when we start thinking a little bit about this, of course, one thing is drawing that map. You can create, if you are projecting a building, you can have all of that mapped into a sheet of paper. But now the question goes, how do you transform that into reality? Now, it is a challenge because even if you want to build a perfect model, if you want to build a perfect guardrails, if you want to build a perfect system, you will never do that. You will never achieve that perfection. So you need to live with something that might not be perfect, but might be good enough at the stage where you are in. And why I'm saying this is because we see that the world is changing it in our lives, in our organizations, way faster than we can adapt. We see that when we think about AI as an example, and even if you think about those nice, how UPS or Netflix or Starbucks rethought certain business models or certain processes to leverage AI, the reality is the majority of time when we are discussing AI, it comes from a personal, individualistic perspective. It is because we know that AI and the citizen development are today reshaping productivity across companies. We see a massive, in any company, Fortum, no exception, we see a massive adoption of AI in individuals on how they can produce inclusive teams, but we see that in that one to a few blast radios in the way that they are rethinking from their perspective how they do things. One great example of this is actually something from a few weeks back called Emma. Emma is a new digital colleague for our Finnish customer service. Emma stands for Email Management and Message Assistance, and it is part of joining our Copilot AI agent family. And it is something that comes very intrinsic from teams. It is not a big project. It's something that comes in the day-to-day of people seeing that they have now tools that allow them to rethink how they work. A majority of our time is today spent on that. And now the question is, wanting it or not, regardless as a leader, if you are an enthusiastic about technology and AI and automation, or if you are a little bit more conservative and you want to make sure that you have the perfect guardrails, the reality is that all around us, you will never go for that perfection, because the reality is that today, want it or not, either with approved AI tools or with shadow IT, but these are in your organizations one way or the other. Now, the question is that how do we pair that operating model with this disruption around us, with setting up good frameworks to cope and to actually thrive? Now, one of the things that we did, given that customer centricity was a key priority for us, we started, let's say, 3 different big initiatives across our 3 priorities to drive exactly for this, to setting the good digital foundation. One was more connected to how we become as IT more customer-centric, both for our end users within the company, but also for our stakeholders, was to rethink all of our IT for IT tooling and across different areas. So starting with how we think about service management and core capabilities, but looking at how we do the portfolio management, how we do the IT financial management, how we do the end user experience, how we do also more on the technical room, how we do IT operations management, how do we set identity governance administration, and how we look at IT asset management. Once we started to modernize these foundations, we started to also unlock more automation capabilities and more AI capabilities. Now, I wouldn't say that the primary objective is to unlock AI capabilities, but it is to ensure that we have a very solid foundation where we can build upon. You cannot build AI if you don't have clarity about what are the processes that you want to optimize, what are you actually want to improve and change or rethink. Now, this enabled quite a lot of unlocking a lot new opportunities, but also this by itself is not enough. Another area that we looked was zero trust. So cybersecurity, of course, naturally, as a company like us that has a critical infrastructure and mission critical capabilities, it's kind of imperative that we look at cybersecurity. And Zero Trust was as one of ways for us to enable more resilience, more compliance, but also unlocking new value creation by simplifying a lot of things that before were incredibly complex or overly complex. And I think naturally, when we start thinking about the classic approach that we try to restrict everything and we try to contain everything into a secure network, the reality is that we know that in the days that we live, you never really can do that. We know that with, for instance, with AI, with Mythos, or with any kind of new attack vectors, the attackers are using AI to do that. So you cannot use the same classical approach anymore. So one of the things that we did was exactly to start that Zero Trust journey and looking at how do we actually protect assets using central policies and how we are able to look at more from a, let's say, isolated point of view where things are not so coupled. So how do we be able to decouple all of our infrastructure from a connectivity perspective that we are not dependent on an issue that affecting one specific asset could propagate very quickly to others. So how do we create that resilience on our backbone and on our infrastructure? Now, a third item has been on how we drive for more efficient operations. So even if we have the technology that we built on these different areas like in service management or end user experience or portfolio management, we also had to pair this with rethinking how we are delivering IT services all across Fortum. We started to look primarily from, in a way, any house is built from foundations, so we started to look from the infrastructure and connectivity as a first point. But then we started to expand all across that ecosystem. Eventually, we want to drive more and more towards a unified delivery, meaning that whenever, regardless of what is the IT service that you have in the company, we want to make sure that there's a seamless experience when handovering across teams, and that we avoid having, in a way, things bouncing between different teams, a little bit lost, sometimes ping-ponging between them. We wanted to enable that unified delivery experience where it's seamless from where to contact and how can we also automate that end-to-end flow, regardless if something is more deep technical on the connectivity or infrastructure or something is a little bit more mundane and that can be solved almost without any human intervention. Now, all of this points to how we've been rethinking those foundations of the house as, let's say, enablers for us to do something more. Now, when you think about AI can be, of course, used as a foundation to enable that business growth. Now, when you look at our digital strategy, when you look at how we are elevating the customer experience, how we strengthen our operations, those, of course, are value levers. But it is important for us that, we expand continuously our core capabilities to cover the disruption that AI brings, for instance, how we do AI posture management, but also how we elevate our technical capabilities. So, for instance, if you think about identities, so how can we handle the life cycle of non-human identities in the era of agents? So regardless of if you are doing AI experiments as a citizen developer, or if you are doing more concrete experiments to change your business model, all of this will require that you expand the thinking of how you operate to ensure that you have a few key guardrails on top of it. I'm also curious to hear your experiences on this part. So you also have now, and you should have now a new question in your screen. So please do share. Really happy to hear your thoughts as well. But this has been a little bit our journey. It is never perfect. It is never finished. And I think this is also something that we also need to, as leaders, we need to cope with that of leaving things that might not be perfect, but might actually solve today's problems and also enabling a foundation for solving the next 10 similar problems that will appear based on that. With that, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for having me, and also very happy to hear any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Bruno, very much for very thought-provoking presentation. And I think it was also very interesting to hear Fortum's digital ambition and strategy, a few words about that, and also about that open reflection on kind of dancing between the expectations in the middle of AI hype and on the other hand, the reality on the AI maturity as well.
Thank you.
In the situation where necessary, the classic approach doesn't anymore help us. As you said, now there is an opportunity for have a conversation with our audience, so we can have a few questions, and I think there are already a few. So let's have a look on those. So the first question that we have from the audience is about leadership and how should leadership teams balance experimentation with governance in AI adoption?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
It is.
Well, I think there's no right or wrong question. And it is a balance is by definition something that you need to continuously put yourself and or measure. I think it's really key to it requires a proportional effort. And I think this is what people often don't realize is that a lot of the discussions are about citizen development and experimentation on a personal level. And while I think that is great because it reshapes workforce, the real big bang of how companies can make a big impact with AI requires them to really think foundational how they work and rethinking their business models or their processes. Now the question is that if you overinvest and put on your efforts on governance just to curb the experimentation on a personal level, it's maybe not the right balance. So you need to make sure that there's enough business demand within your internal stakeholders to actually create certain guardrails and certain governance structures. But regardless of AI, ensure that you have a certain baseline. And I think this is a little bit, you should have a certain governance in the company, regardless if you are a mass adopter of AI or not. Because AI governance comes as an extension of your existing governance, not something that you do on the side.
Good point. And you mentioned impact several times in your answer. So the next question is actually about value as well. So how should one measure real business value from AI and automation initiatives?
Oh, great question. I'm not sure if I have the exact answer on it, but for all of the business value levers that we have, we set a certain business KPIs or a certain ambition level on that business KPIs. I cannot naturally share them here, but I think you need to specifically look at those to understand how quick or how fast are you moving. Are you moving on the right direction, or are you still stagnated in some of them? Now, it is a business KPI, and I want to really emphasize that because a lot of people measure the value of AI by, let's say, technical metrics. How many users are using Copilot or any other tool? That's not necessarily a business metric.
Yeah, it's more like a leading metrics, but not necessarily a lagging indicator of success.
Exactly.
Yeah, good point. Right, and maybe we can have a very quick question, one more. So maybe about that leadership, that was the key theme for your presentation. So what do you think, in your point of view, what differentiates successful leaders in AI-driven transformation from those who struggle? Or what could be your tip?
Good question. I think it's all about placing yourself in a neutral ground, meaning that you will always have the people that are overly enthusiastic. You will always also have the naysayers. And I think that both points are right. So I think it's about how do you find that balance, internal balance to drive the transformation, meaning that cool heads prevail. And I think this is really important with any kind of big technology shift. So you should not, in a way, push it away and pretend it doesn't exist. At the same time, you don't necessarily need to be overly enthusiastic about it. But you need to have the cool head to understand where it can actually provide value or where it can be more a distraction. And I think that's something that I try to do every day, and there's no also right and wrong for that.
Yeah, maybe we should do that more often too. Thank you, Bruno, for your great presentation and discussion.
And thank you.